What is up, guys? Chris here, Bear Market Mining. Thanks again for stopping by. So today I'm going to show you how to build a profitable CPU mining rig on a budget. So this whole build will cost you less than $250 and will get you started on your passive income crypto journey. 2025 is going to be a huge year for crypto mining. So right now is a good time to start. So we'll go through all of the parts, the build, any settings that may be required, and I'll even show you a way that if you wanted to build another type of rig to pick any parts, make sure they're all compatible. So without further ado, let's get into it. But before we start, do me a solid, hit that like button, consider subscribing, and let's get to it. Okay, so first up, let's have a look at the parts in this particular build. Now, as a note, all of the parts that I have bought are secondhand to reduce costs from verified eBay sellers and various other verified sellers online. You can buy these brand new, you can buy them secondhand, but I would always recommend, if you're buying them secondhand, get them from a reputable seller. So first up, we have the motherboard, the MSI B450A Pro Max. This is an AM4 socket motherboard. Now the socket size is important depending on what type of CPU and cooler you're using, but I'll explain more about that later. This is a really good, cheap motherboard. It has voltage control, which is really important, and we'll get into that a little bit later. Moving on to our CPU, this is the 3900X. This is one of the best low power CPUs you can buy for CPU mining when you're considering cost, efficiency, and hash rate. So this is a 12 core, 24 thread processor with a TDP of 105 watts. So it's not going to be using a lot of power, which is important because that will reduce your electricity bill and increase your profits. Our CPU cooler. This is really important for CPU mining because these CPUs, while they may be efficient and using low power in theory, a stock cooler simply won't allow these to run at max power all the time and keep them cool. So the Thermalright Assassin Spirit V2 Plus does exactly that. I've got 6 or 7 of these on my rigs. They're 66 CFM, around 1500 RPM, dual fan. You have one fan blowing air out and one fan pushing cooler air into the big heatsink there. So these are really, really efficient at keeping rigs cool. I've got these on bigger builds, bigger CPU builds like 7950Xs, and they keep those a lot cooler as well. And they use about twice the power of this 3900X. So a really, really good budget CPU cooler. The last few little items that we will need, of course, we need RAM. This is just 8GB RAM. I actually had this lying around, so there'll be no cost added for this, which is great. You don't need high-speed RAM for CPU mining in 99% of the cases. So if you've got a stick and it's 8GB and it's compatible with the motherboard, we'll get into that in a sec. Use that, save yourself some money. Same story here for the SSD. This is an M.2. It's a 128GB storage device. This is just going to be for you to flash HiveOS or your operating system of choice on. You can use a flash drive, but for the cost of these and for the increased speed compared to a flash drive, I would always recommend an SSD, even an M.2, just to keep the rig with a few less cords and a little bit cleaner. Lastly, we're going to need to power this CPU mining rig on. So a Thermaltake light power, 350 watts is going to be plenty. Low power for these because you want them to be in that 50% plus range, a little bit higher depending on the class. That's going to increase efficiency and reduce power loss. So this was another cheap power supply. I bought this brand new, and I would recommend buying brand new power supplies for the cost of them, the warranty, the peace of mind. A really good idea to go brand new for power supplies. So this little Thermaltake light power did exactly the trick. All right, so we are over here on PCPartPicker.com. This is a fantastic resource, just like I said, to figure out part compatibility and costs and places to buy them from. It's literally a one-stop shop for building CPU mining rigs. So I've got my parts already input in here, as you can see, but if you wanted to start, you would simply click on this builder icon over here and it would take you right here. So all you would simply do then is just say you already had a CPU or a motherboard. You'd click on a motherboard just like so. You would enter your motherboard in just like so and click add. What that will then do, if you're looking to buy a CPU to go with that motherboard, you would then come up to this CPU section. As you can see, I've got the 3900X that we'll be using today, but let's just say you wanted to put a different CPU in there. You were thinking, okay, I want to put a 7950X in there, for example. You'd type in 7950 and it would say 0 compatible products. Let's just say you wanted to go a step down and put a 5900X in there. You would see that this is compatible and can be added. So you can do this with everything. You can do it with your fan, you can do it with your storage, your RAM, etc. So this is a really, really good way to do it. And it has brand new prices here. So if you click on this price or click on the part itself, it'll take you to a list of different sellers, Amazon, Newegg, all that sort of stuff. And you can figure out exactly where to buy them from if you wanted to buy brand new. So a really, really good resource. Finally, one of the best parts about this website is compatibility. It says see notes below. So some motherboards to run newer gen CPUs will require a BIOS update. And if that is the case, it will tell you down in the notes below. It will also tell you about clearances, different slots that they should go in. So this is, like I keep saying, a fantastic resource so you can figure out exactly what parts go with what and where to buy them from. Okay, so now that we have these parts lists and you know how to look for other parts and make compatible builds yourself, let's get into this particular build. Now, if you have any questions, pause it, ask down in the comments or join the Discord. Link is in the description. I'll be happy to answer anything, but without further ado, let's start building. All right, first things first, we need to install our CPU fan mounting bracket. So this came with the Thermaltake Assassin V2. Each of your specific fans will come with mounting brackets. So very simply, we're gonna pop those on the back plate right there, get them down, and bang, step one. This is our actual mounting bracket itself. Get that on there, trusty screwdriver. Now you don't have to over tighten these, but I like to give them a pretty decent tighten. They're gonna be spinning 24/7 with the fan on top of it, so I like to give them a decent crank just to make sure it's, it's not going anywhere there. Next up, we will install our CPU. Now there is a certain way this needs to go on, and it's important that it goes on the right way. You don't want to mess this part up, it's pretty important. You'll see there's a little dot right here in the corner, and that will line up, if you can see it, with that little dot in the corner there. So that's the way it has to go on every single time, otherwise it won't sit down. If it doesn't feel right when it sits in, it's probably not. So give that a little jiggle, tighten that down, and we're in. Next up, thermal paste, very important. This is high quality thermal paste from Noctua, and this is what's gonna connect between the CPU here and the plate on the heatsink of the cooler. So I like to put a fair amount on there, like so. And then you're gonna spread that out nice and even. All right, that will do it. So next up, we're gonna mount this heatsink itself on here. You'll line these screws up with the screw holes at the bottom, 1 and 2. And you wanna sort of go side by side here. Give that a little tighten, make sure it's going on, then give the other side a little bit of a tighten, and just keep going back and forth until it's sitting down nice and solid. You don't want to over tighten because you could damage your CPU that way, but firm is a good way I like to describe it. If it feels like hard work to tighten the screw anymore, you're probably going too far or at that point where you can stop. So right about there we are, like so. Next up, we'll install the fans onto the cooler. These will come with this particular brand, these little brackets right here, and they simply clip onto the front. 1, 2. Let's grab another one. 1 and 2. And then there's some little ribs on the side there. So these little springs just go over the ribs on the side. Can be a little awkward at first to get on, just like so, but you'll get the hang of it. You'll get the feel of it. It's fairly straightforward. One side clipped. Time for number 2. Same process again. Try and hold both sides at the same time. One side click, 2 side click. Now you'll see here we have the front one has got a splitter on it. So this main part is going to go into the CPU fan header, which is right here. Plug that in, and then these 2 parts, if I can see, will plug in just like so. All right, and that's it to start. We have the CPU and the CPU fan installed. Next, let's chuck this RAM in. Now the RAM will only slot in one way. You can see it's got one longer bar than the other, and that will line up with the slot in here. So same again, if it feels like you have to force it, it's probably in the wrong way. So you don't want to force stuff when you're building rigs. Click, click, simple as that, in right there. Next up, let's install our storage. This is our M.2. It will slot in right here, right next to the CPU and the fan. And it will come with this tiny little screw right here, if you can see that. So we'll make sure that's pushed in, sit it, push it down, screw it in, and you should be able to see that tighten down. That's just going to hold that in place. Like so. So now of course we need to plug our power supply in. First we'll put the 24 pin right in this ATX Power 1 slot. These can often be firm to get in, but just make sure it's got a nice solid connection as so, and that's in. And then we've got our 8-pin CPU header here as well, and that's just going to clip in right at the front. Bang, click, you hear that. Last but not least, our little power switch to turn the thing on. That's what's going to give this power and boot up that power supply. So you may not be able to see very well, but right here are our power headers. Refer to the motherboard manual if you want to see how that connects. So you slot that on, and then we get ready to power up. Everything is now connected. Time to power on. Now that our rig is built, we're going to want to tweak some BIOS settings. So to access the BIOS, you're going to need to plug in a keyboard and a monitor. Now, depending on what CPU you have, whether it has integrated graphics or not, this particular build does not. You'll need to attach a graphics card and plug your HDMI cable into the graphics card to get some output. Once you can see the screen while it's loading up, hit that delete button and F12 button and you will be in the BIOS. So the first thing that I like to do is set these fan speeds. Now this will be the settings for this particular motherboard. They'll all be in different locations depending on the motherboard, but if you are using this combo, this is where you'll go. So you'll just click on this all full speed fan right here, and that's all it takes. You can see the CPU fan is running at that 1500 RPMs non-stop. That's exactly what we want. Next up, restore AC after power loss. So you can see right here exactly how to access these settings. Settings, advanced power management setup. What this is going to mean is that if you need to turn the rig off for any reason, when you want to turn it back on, you can simply hit the power button on the power supply and it will boot up. You don't need the jumper cable to start, so it makes it that much easier. Thirdly, above 4G memory. Now, you may or may not need to put this on. In more than often cases with CPU mining, you don't. I turn it on anyway. It comes as a feature with this board, maybe a little placebo, but I turn it on. You have an option whether to or not. Next up, VGA detection. So you can put this on ignore or you can leave it on auto. For some certain motherboards, if you leave it on auto, it will try and detect a VGA or a graphics card in there and won't boot up without it. So always good just to keep this one off. Now, the most important setting of all is the CPU core voltage. So this is going to want to run, as you can see at the top here, at 1.4 volts. But if we're doing that, we're using full power unnecessarily. So for this particular motherboard, you go into CPU core voltage, click on override mode, and I've set 1 volt there. Now you can start lower or higher and work your way up and down. You will know if it's working because the PC will crash. It won't boot up. So maybe start higher, for instance, 1.1, 1.2, work your way down as low as you can. This is going to reduce the overall power consumption and keep it as efficient as possible. Here we just have us saving the configurations and exit, so you can see a full list of what we've done there. Now you can overclock or enable XMP on your RAM if you want to. I don't do it personally. It uses more power and has hardly any extra benefit. That is completely up to you whether you want to use that or not. Okay, great. So we've got our parts assembled, we've built the rig, we've set up the BIOS correctly to run as efficiently as possible. You're obviously going to need an operating system. Now for this particular video, we'll be using HiveOS, and I will leave a link up the top of the video. It's a complete beginner's guide, how to set up HiveOS, how to set up a wallet. So make sure you click on that and bookmark it if it's your first time. It will completely explain how to do all of that, and then you'll be able to get into mining and start overclocking. So the last thing to look at is how much is this making. So we are over here on hashrate.no. I will link that in the description for you also. A great resource to find any coins that you might want to look up and check their profitability. So moving down, we have a list of different coins: Etika, Zephyr, Quantum RL, Raptorium. These are more of your old school stable coins in the CPU mining space. So as far as revenue is concerned, you might look to pay this off in about 15, 16 months or so. Obviously, your profit will depend based on your electric rate, but this is a really good resource to figure out exactly how much you can make. Now, I should mention there are many more coins out there that aren't listed on hashrate.no that are making a bit more money than these are. So if you know where to look, or if you want to do your research, they're definitely out there. Don't solely go off this list, but you know, a 15-16 month ROI on any investment, as far as I'm concerned, is a pretty good one. So that will wrap it up, guys. We've been through everything from this particular build, how to set it up, parts, how to set up another build, profitability, BIOS settings, and all the stuff you will need. Like I mentioned earlier, I'll link it again up the top and in the description. I've got a full beginner's guide on how to set up HiveOS and overclocks, wallets, all that stuff. So make sure you check that one out. I'll also leave a link for Discord in the description. I have a channel in there called New Miners, which is dedicated to people getting into crypto mining. So any questions you have, join the Discord at me and I'll get back to you, or many of the other members in there are very helpful. So ask as many questions as you want, jump in, have fun, chat away. That'll wrap it up, guys. Hit the like button, consider subscribing, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.